Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Not Complain Enough. I'm your podcast host, Carista, and this week I want to talk about self-care, but not in a way of like this, oh, you've got to self-care and be all about self-care and things like that. I'm talking about how we can actually assert some better boundaries in the workplace to start our own form of self-care to actually nourish our body and look after ourselves. So before I worked in corporate environments, and namely the federal government for the last 12 years, I was actually a beauty therapist. So I used to work in some of the most amazing spas, to be honest. I worked in London, I worked on the Isle of Arran in Scotland, and I also worked in Ireland. And actually, Ireland was probably where uh, the most magical spas I've visited thus far, I found. So I worked in this spa and actually was the sort of supervisor of the spa, um, where we had like it was 15 or so rooms, maybe 20 rooms. And as part of that, there was a huge thalassotherapy pool. And for those of you that don't know what thalassotherapy is, it's using seawater, and it had like all different jets and things like that. So basically, you can go around to different aspects of the pool to help with circulation, help with just lymphatic moving things around and stuff like that. Um, and actually, like, it was one of the most amazing places to work as well because, it was part of a hotel. So people like to indulge when they're on holidays, right? We love to go on holidays and look after ourselves while we're on holidays to, have a massage, have a bit of a treat. And it really struck me. I mean, today I have taken myself to get a massage and had a wonderful infrared sauna by the beautiful team at Mesa in Freshwater. If you are around the Northern Beaches in Sydney, I highly recommend checking it out. Georgia and the team there are just beautiful, and it's such a great space. Like, they've just created this beautiful space. Um, and yeah, so like I was reflecting after my treatments today on how people like to indulge when they go on holidays, and they like to, be pampered and indulge in these things when we're away, which of course we love to do, right? We work hard for it, so we like to go and enjoy. And it like kind of struck me today going and having a massage. And I haven't been for a little while to go get a massage actually. Um, and to be honest, I'm a bit of a fussy bitch when it comes to being massaged because I used to do it for a living. So, sometimes you're lying there being like, what are you doing? Um, but I must say today it was so beautiful. It just reminded me of the therapist who I had there, Donna. She was just so gorgeous, and she included hot stones as part of the massage treatment. And it made me remember how much I just love hot stones. If you haven't tried it, I highly recommend going and getting a hot stone massage. Um, there's just something so deeply therapeutic about it and so nourishing and warming. I think having hot stones on you it just adds that extra element to a beautiful massage. Um, but yeah, like today's treatments made me reflect on my experience working in spas and um, places where they had thalassotherapy pools and Razuls, which is like, it's a fancy kind of sauna, if you will, where you kind of usually do it as a couple thing. You'll put mud wraps on each other and then sit there in these beautiful rooms that usually have like some it's quite dark with some LED lights, and it's like a sauna. But it just made me think, like, we're in these, as I alluded to last episode, bullshit jobs. And, some of that nonsense busy work is really, really tiring. And it's actually, I would even suggest, more tiring than it is when you're actually busy doing stuff. And interestingly, I was reflecting on how um, being an executive assistant to a CEO, was working ridiculously crazy hours to the point where I have categorically had burnout a couple of times. Like, I would say a good, half a dozen, if not more times, in my 12 or so years of doing that. And the one thing that I implemented in the last couple of years, so probably from like 2019, maybe, yeah, roundabout, or 2018, 2019. I was introduced to an incredible chiropractor, and he does neuroemotional technique. So part of that is working through all the different emotions that are actually trapped within your body. And it's sort of, if anyone's had kinesiology, it's a similar type of experience. You're kind of muscle testing to find how a memory relates to an emotion and what age that happened. And so essentially, it's sort of like, what age is it stuck in your body? So I found this incredible guy, Damien, who has a place in Balmain East called Infinity Chiropractor. If you're in Sydney, I highly recommend checking him out. He's just incredible. Um, and so I would do a neuroemotional technique session with him. And afterwards, as part of that treatment, you have acupuncture as well. And when at the height of some pretty intense periods and very, very burnt out, I was suffering chronic inflammation from, celiac disease, but also what I then found out to be what is known as CIR, so chronic inflammatory response syndrome, which is caused from environments with mold. And so I found this incredible chiropractor who I was seeing twice a week at that point in time. And I made appointments. Thankfully, he had appointments that were sort of later in the evening. So I would have like a 6 p.m. or a 6:30 p.m. appointment. And that was my one thing that I started to implement to help me make a commitment to myself to get out of the office. And I think that it's just so important. Like, we are in these offices that, they create them and they make them so that they're kind of like, oh, it's we've got tea and coffee here, and there's lounges, and there's, yoga or meditation or whatever they're trying to entice you to kind of stay in the office, whilst also loading you up with shitloads of work and making it almost impossible to leave by a certain time. We all work, I think, well, there's definitely lots of studies to show us that we actually work better at different times for different people. So some people are morning people, some people are evening people. I, for one, am a evening person. Like, I am not so firing on all cylinders in the morning, but like, I am great in the afternoon. And to be honest, like, when I was working as an executive assistant, my most productive time was was actually when everyone had left the office. So I used to be there quite late because I could actually smash through so much work when there was no one there to be interrupting me or distracting. Um, and when you're in those sorts of roles, like, you're constantly interrupted, you're constantly answering phone calls. Everything's urgent. And so I found that, that quiet time of being able to do things was sort of after hours. So therefore, I was working later and later, getting more things done. And, all of these aspects lead to burnout. um, so, yeah, I just feel like coming back to, massages and different things like that. I'm not suggesting that you have to go and find a chiropractor and have an ET and acupuncture or go get a massage. Um, what I am saying though is that you need to find what works for you. And for me, even though I had committed to, thinking, oh, I'm going to go to a gym class or go to a yoga class or go to a sound healing or a meditation or something like that. Um, when it came down to it, I was like, oh, there's too much work on. I'll miss that class. And I found that because I wasn't needing to leave, it was sort of like a choice thing. I was in a zone where I was like, oh no, I need to keep working. Whereas when I had a committed appointment that I needed to get to, so that was my chiropractor to start off with, which was that worked really well for my schedule. I also was doing massages where I could, um, but that proved difficult to try and get the right timing for some of those too. And I mean, personally, I just found that if you have an appointment that you need to get to, it becomes this non-negotiable of needing to leave. And so, introducing some of those aspects into your week, and even if it's just one thing, like one thing that you have to turn up to. Um, so, maybe it's a commitment to going for a walk with a friend, and you've got to say to them, don't let me cancel. Don't let me be late and don't let me cancel. Or maybe it is booking a massage and you have to turn up at that time. Or it could be, a group like soccer group or a football game or, something that you have that's a non-negotiable commitment to get to. And I think that, when we can implement some of these things into our weeks, um, not only are we feeling like we're taking a bit of ourselves back from this perpetual being in the office, um, but also, for those of you that have children, it helps to create that space for you to do things for yourself as well. And making sure that you are still, looking after yourself. Because the best thing that you can do is actually be a role model for your children as well, and being like, this is mom or dad looking after ourselves. Um, and I think that when we look at it from those perspectives, we can kind of see how, intricately like how important that is, particularly when you're in these workplaces that you don't feel like any of your time is respected, or that and when I say that your time's not respected, I mean like, you know, uh, people just putting meetings in your schedule without actually consulting you to see if that's actually okay, or if you do have the time for that. Um, and I just found it perplexing. Like, when I worked as an EA and I was working for a CEO, I would still call up other people's EAs or call up those people that were included and be like, hi, I'm looking to schedule this for this time. Does that work for you? And work with people around that instead of the audacity. I mean, sometimes you've got to do it, like, because there's no choice, and that's all that you can kind of fit into the Tetris of a schedule. But for the most part, like, it's actually just having that courtesy of being like, I'm scheduling this time. Does that work for you? And, having those little moments of acknowledging that people can value their own time, by even just asking, is that okay? it's about asking these questions. And I think when it comes to self-care and looking after ourselves and looking after our energy, um, we need to be doing things that are helping to fortify us instead of depleting us. And particularly around these, obviously very stressful times. There's so much going on collectively in the world, let alone within your own world. Um, I think that we really need to be dialing up how we actually check in with ourselves and how we look after ourselves. And my biggest bugbear with a lot of these big companies is that, they demand respect, and yet they don't necessarily respect their own employees. They don't respect their own staff enough to be checking in with them. So many of them value customer feedback or external consultant feedback over their own staff. And I just feel like they're missing the point. And I think that so many of these organizations could actually save a shitload of money. They could save so much time and um, just nonsense by actually listening, and not just, listening in this way where it's like, oh, yeah, we hear you. We hear you. We're doing this, in a patronizing kind of, um, using platitudes to kind of make people just stop talking about certain things. But I'm talking about actually listening and taking on board and working together for solutions, not just, um, yeah, like outsourcing. I mean, we see so much of this outsourcing, and all these organizations. Like my most recent example with telcos is that so many of them they outsource everything. Like they have um, contractors for their call centers, contractors for their technicians. Um, they've outsourced so much, and I think that in outsourcing it dilutes the values of an organization, because whilst you may have a contract with these organizations as contractors, they're not necessarily going to um, embody the values and the ethos and all of the things that you're wanting to present as an organization. Um, because, for them, they are needing to make sure that the statistics that has been ingrained in their contract as part of that provider is met. And so, there's things that fall by the wayside when they're trying to meet those targets. And it correlates to our self-care too. We can't be outsourcing it all the time. And, initially, yeah, for sure. Like if you need to outsource it in order to get yourself into a routine to actually start to value yourself again, and to increase your self-esteem, because so many of these organizations just erode self-esteem like there is no tomorrow. I see so many people that are just, they're like a shell of their former self, and it's so fucking sad. And it's awful that they get to this point where they're literally a shell of their former self. They can't, you know, they can't see any way out. They feel so stuck. And I think that that's what I'm getting to as well. It's like, if you're feeling stuck, if you feel like you can't, cope, and I know that times are tough for so many people right now, but if there's, one thing that you can find, one non-negotiable thing, and, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to spend a fortune on appointments of different activities. As I said before, it could just be like going for a walk with a friend and telling them that, don't let me cancel, don't let me be late, make sure I get there. And, commit to keeping those appointments, commit to making that space for yourself. And that is just one step. Like, and I'm not suggesting every day, although every day is amazing. I know that that's not possible. Like small steps. Maybe it's once a month. Maybe it's indulging in um, a like I shouldn't say indulging because I do feel like massage is actually something that we have created as an indulgence, which is actually something that if we look at the history of massage, it's something that we should be looking at integrating into our lives so much more than we do. Um, but yeah, maybe it's a massage once a month. And as a former beauty therapist, that's what's recommended for well-being is to, a massage once a month is something that's really good for you. Maybe it's a yoga class. Maybe it's even just trying some places. There's plenty of places that have introductory um, specials or introductory kind of classes and different things like that. Um, I know some organizations have you can do it as part of a well-being thing, and they've got discounts or whatever. Just find something that works for you, something that lights you up. Maybe it's a dance class, maybe it's, going and trying pottery or painting or, doing something to really disconnect and something that takes you away from thinking about work and having that constantly going around in your head. Because I think part of it as well is that because we're so hyper connected to our offices through taking laptops home, having work phones, having email even on our personal phone, it's really hard to disconnect. And the reason that I found going to the chiropractor so beneficial for me was I'd have my session, he'd put the acupuncture needles in, and I was lying in a dark room listening to wonderful music, nice, relaxing music for at least half an hour, uninterrupted on my own. And that, during that period of time, was the start of being able to learn how to relax in a different way. It was like forced relaxation. I couldn't just pick up my phone and scroll. I couldn't respond to things because I was literally lying on a table with acupuncture needles in me. So if the phone, you know, vibrated or rang, I couldn't answer it. And I think that there's something to be said about finding those spaces where you are inaccessible for that period of time. I think that we are too accessible sometimes. And yeah, to have that space to be able to be not accessible and commit to one thing a week, or one thing a month. If it's too much to do it weekly, once a month, or even once every 2 months. Start as little or as much as you can. And, you know, don't like overschedule yourself either. Um, I'm talking like one thing a week, not one thing every day, or even twice a week. And yeah, just start slowly. I think, this is part of forming those better boundaries with the workplace. Um, and that was the thing. Like I had to leave by a certain time in order to get to my appointment. There was no negotiation with that. My appointment was a certain time and I needed to be there. And so, sure, sometimes I'd be like, look, I'll finish this off when I get home. But most of the time I was like, I'm actually done for the day. It's almost 6:30. I'm done. And yeah, like we need to be honoring ourselves a lot more than we do. And I think that, we work for these institutions that demand respect, and yet a lot of the time they don't show us much respect. So, how can you respect yourself more? How can you love yourself more, a bit more every day? I hope this has helped. I hope that maybe you like the video. I'll try it out for a little bit, see if people are into that. But yeah, please let me know what you think. Please like, follow, subscribe. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Not Compliant Enough. But yeah, let me know. I've got some pretty cool interviews getting lined up. So I'm excited to branch out into some of those as well. I hope you have a gentle week and yeah, thank you for listening.